So you've quit another hobby, or another skill that you said you would learn, or another interest that you said you'd dive deeper into, or worse yet, you haven't even started. It's been days, it's been weeks, it's been months, maybe even years, and you're stuck in the same place. Maybe it was an instrument that you were supposed to be learning, or perhaps it was painting, or perhaps it was writing, poetry. Maybe it was writing a book. Maybe it was content creation. Whatever it was, you haven't gone any further. And it's leaving you feeling disillusioned. As someone with multiple passions, I completely feel you, which is why in this video, I want to talk about why we quit prematurely and how we can actually avoid doing that. And there's kind of one more thing I want to talk about, which may be slightly opposed to the other things I'm going to say, but it's an important point to note. So I'm not going to waste any time. Let's just get into it. The first problem is you're pursuing hobbies, skills, and interests that you think you should instead of the ones that you're actually interested in. Now, in a world where everybody is telling us the things that we should do, this aesthetic, this box, oh, you're a gym bro, you should be doing this. Oh, you're a clean girl aesthetic, this is your starter kit, whatever it is. And so we start to fall into this trap of believing that, well, in order to fit into this box, I have to do X, Y, B, and Z. Right? Like, well, they were doing horse riding, so I guess I should be doing horse riding. Or the gym bros are also, doing football, so I guess I should be doing football. But those things aren't actually the things you're interested in. They're not the skills that you want to develop. And so when you start along that path, you find very quickly that you cannot sustain it, right? Either you just don't start because it's not pulling you in the way that you expect, or you start and you quit relatively quickly. The thing is, as human beings, we're hardwired to almost avoid discomfort, right? Like we don't really want to be in situations that cause, say, high stress, or for us to exert energy on things that we'd rather not. And the thing is, when you are doing something that you don't really want to do, you're doing it, say, for everybody else, or to match some aesthetic that you think you should be belonging to, is that when it gets uncomfortable, you're going to quit, right? You're going to just run away from the situation like, I don't really want to do this anymore. So my suggestion as somebody who has kind of cataloged a lot of things that they're interested in, ruled some things out, is work out and reflect on the things that you're interested in, the things that you're already pursuing or that you're thinking about pursuing. And why is that? Right? And it's okay if you start something and you realize later that actually this isn't it. But the point that I'm making here is that without that period of reflection on what it is you're doing, you will easily be consumed, if you'd like, by everything around you, by all these sources that are telling you to do this or to do that, or you should be belonging to this group and, well, this group does that. Forget that. Like, I am somebody who for years on YouTube had thought, well, I don't know what my niche is. And I knew that would probably mean I would grow a lot slower, but I knew that that's just not what I wanted to do. I don't want to fit into this box or that box. And eventually you find your tribe, you find the things that you enjoy. It's just the nature of the game. The second reason why you may be quitting or not even starting on any of these things is you're making it too complex. Right? You're over complicating the first steps that you need to take to get started on this journey or in these early phases. Now, I think about this in a MVP kind of style. Like, we have something called the minimum viable product in tech, which is effectively decided about what do we need to get this thing off the ground. Right? Forget about all of the fancy things. What is the bare minimum that we need to get this off the ground? And it kind of works in like entrepreneurship as well. Like, if we're getting a product out, what are the basics that we need? And when you are thinking about starting something on that early phases, that's really what you should be concerned with is, what are the basics that I need? If it's painting, you don't need to go and get this elaborate studio set up, right? You just maybe need to get a 10, 15 pound paint set from Amazon. And that's enough to get started. But you can get canvas, some paints. Granted, these things won't be the highest quality, but they are enough to get you off the ground and get you through that first initial stage even of your journey. Now, I think one of the reasons that we trip up on this step as well is because the people that we are seeking inspiration from, or that we're even learning from, like if we're watching somebody's vlog or a how-to or their TikTok, whatever it is, are often a lot further than us, or they're ahead of us in whatever it is we're pursuing, like whatever skill, hobby, or interest it is that we are pursuing. And they often have elaborate setups. Right? They have quite, really fancy cameras sometimes if it's content creation, or like I said, an elaborate art studio. They have been in the game for years, and the likelihood is they didn't start with all that. So another thing that you should probably do is try to seek out the how-to for the beginners effectively, right? The basics, as we were saying, because a lot of those professionals online, if they are really trying to bring people in, will have a how to get started kind of a thing. I've seen that with painting. I've seen that with writing. I've seen that with so many things, content creation. Like, here is your very basic setup. And so if you are, again, struggling with that initial getting it going, That's what you need to be focusing on. The third thing is shiny object syndrome. And this kind of links to the first issue about what you should and shouldn't be doing, but it's more so that there are so many things that you can do that as soon as something else comes up, right? A new TikTok pops up and says, you should do this, or an Instagram post or a YouTube video or any source, right? It comes from any source. You're like, oh, I'm gonna do that thing now. I'm gonna do that thing now. And what that means is that you never develop any of these skills to a high enough standard. And it's something that I spoke about in my video up here, where I was talking about managing your multiple passions and interests. And the issue is that if you never develop them to a high enough level, you don't get to enjoy the things that come with mastery, right? And being able to take abstract ideas, if it's writing, if it's content, if it's music, right? Whatever it is, and turn them into something tangible, right? Realize that thing, because you're off onto the other thing. Shiny object syndrome, over there, over there, over there. And that's a big problem, which is why you have to give yourself enough time to get good at some of these things that you're pursuing, or to dive deeper into these interests. Otherwise, you're missing out on this really, really important element of being a Renaissance man or woman, for example. So the next point I want to make is actually linked to a video that I did a while back on the war of art. And this book is a fantastic book if you're creative or you're actually just trying to pursue anything really outside of work. This book is very valuable. But effectively, Pressfield, the author, talks about the way resistance shows up in our lives and how to combat it. It kind of like groups all of the things that we come across as resistance. And it can take many forms effectively, right? So it could be the form of fear or self-doubt, or in the form of allies. So people who show up in your life and how you interact with them. But it can also be with victimhood, right? Or medicating, self-medicating with things maybe like alcohol. And the thing is, if you don't know how these things are showing up in your life, then when you're faced with them, when you're faced with this form of resistance, it may just stop you in your tracks, right? Because you're not acknowledging that, this is interesting. Every time I try to start something, I have this issue of self-doubt, or I have this issue that I take things personally when things go right, when a project goes right, or when a project goes wrong, right? Or actually, I noticed when I try to pursue something new or try to dive deeper into this thing that victimhood starts to sprout. Like I'm making content, but I've listed all the ways in my head already why I can't do this and why I'm not going to be successful and why I'm not going to grow. Right? But when you do know these things, when you can acknowledge them, then you can kind of face them head on, right? And that can allow you to get across it, that hurdle, and move forward. And the book actually offers an interesting way of solving this, which is about turning pro, which is effectively leveraging the things that we know. We know how to be professional in our, our work and our careers, right? We show up daily, right? Even if we want to, if we don't really want to that day, we think about mastering our skills, right? And, becoming well-versed in our tools. We're committed in the long haul. Like we can see that we're putting in work today for the tomorrows and for the next week and for the years. So if we apply that to the things that we are trying to achieve in our creative life, for example, or whether it is something like coding, like I've said before, we can get a lot further. Now, this book is really, really useful. And if you want to check out this video, then I will say after you've watched this one, go ahead and check it out. But that's just something that I wanted to cover because I think it was a really, really useful way of looking at and kind of almost visualizing that resistance that we face on a day-to-day basis. Another reason you may be quitting or not starting is you actually are not taking any time to realize how it is that you learn and how it is you prefer to interact with information, or whether it's theory or whether it's practical learning, right? And this is really key because if you ignore this, then you're basically fighting an uphill battle. Right? Like you learn one way, but you are going to insist on trying to learn another way because somebody said you should learn it through a book. But you know that you struggle with reading perhaps, right? Or it's just not your favorite way of consuming information. And I love books personally, but I know that some people prefer to get their information in other ways. Or perhaps the thing that you're pursuing is very practical by nature, and therefore learning as you go, learning as you actually, build a project or develop something is the best way to go. This is a big thing for coding, and we talk about this in the coding community, like build projects you're interested in, build things that actually have like some sort of output, because you're more likely to develop the skills that you need. And I mean, any person in the tech industry worth, their weight in gold, as they say, will tell you this. So learn how you learn and then use that to your advantage, right? Because if you align that, you're less likely to quit on this process of acquiring knowledge and acquiring skills and diving deeper into your interests. Like a primary example of this is you may be somebody who actually needs structure in the form of courses, right? Going through YouTube and like going on to all these random videos is not all that helpful for you, right? For some people it can be, and I think the more developed you become, the more refined your searches and things become. But at the beginning, it can be very overwhelming. So maybe you invest in a short course, right? It doesn't have to be an expensive one. I'm not saying go to university necessarily, but a course that has some structure, You looked at the reviews, you've looked at the people in the community, what they're saying, you decide, I'm going to go with this. And it provides you with some foundations, provides you with some things earlier on to kind of form a structure that you can start to work with. The next one's slightly tricky because it's not necessarily a bad thing to prioritize this thing, but if you're not honest about it, it can cause problems. And this is, you're probably focused on monetization and you may not be being honest about it. The number of people I've heard who said they want to start a YouTube channel, right? And when you dive deeper, it's not because they like making content or like they like the idea of necessarily sharing information via this platform, but it's because they've heard that you can get rich quickly, or they've heard that you can get rich and make a lot of money through YouTube. And some people do. Most people on this platform don't. This is just an example I'm using, but you can insert any particular hobby, interest, or skill. And if you approach it in this way and you're not honest about why it is you're here, you're going to quit. Because most things take a while to learn and master and get to a level where someone would pay for that thing, right? Whether it's in time and attention, like watching a video, or whether it's with actual cash, right? They hand you over some money for a product. So you're going to quit early because you're claiming it's because you like this thing, but really in the back of your head, it's a monetization thing. So for example, you quit YouTube after your first 1, 2, 3 videos because nobody's watching, because nobody knows who you are and nobody cares. We don't care yet because we don't know why we should care. You have to provide value. And often you have to provide value over an extended period of time and keep showing up. Like when I started this, 10 people might have been watching, right? 20 people. Eventually we got to 100, and eventually we got to 1,000. We've had sometimes it's been hundreds of thousands, but I've been on this platform for almost 5 years, right? So, and this is just an example I wanted to show you, but be honest about it, because if it is monetization that you're focused on and that's your interest, then your approach will be different, right? And you can set things up in place and align your goals and the things that you're trying to achieve around that. And you may decide that actually these hobbies and skills are not optimal for that. And you can just set a path that is honest and that will lead you to where you're actually trying to go, as opposed to pretending you want to do content creation because you love content creation, for example. One of the last things I want to talk about is the lack of community, which again is something that I've touched on, but we know that when you have a lack of community or people that you can lean on and talk to, then it can be very hard to progress and keep going, because when things get tough, you kind of have no one to confide in, no one to share this journey with, no one to talk to about the things that are going well, or sharing your praise or the good times and the times when things aren't so great, right? And without that, it can be a very isolating experience, which means it's probably time to start reaching out and trying to find communities, right? Whether it's, online is probably the easiest place because you can access so many people. You can access Discord groups, or even in the comment section of these videos. Like I've been seeing people interact in one of my last videos that did really, really well. And so many people are connecting. I was flabbergasted by the response in the comments section of people sharing what they're doing and what they're interested in. So seek out your communities, right? Like seek them out. And if they're not there, build them. Try to build some communities in person, but also online. Leverage what we have available to build that up. And now the final thing I actually want to talk about, and I kind of almost alluded to it in the first point, was it's actually okay to quit. Now, I know I've just spent this whole video talking about reasons why we quit and how to avoid it, but actually, sometimes you just start something and realize, I don't like it. Now, this is more complex on the surface because the reason you don't like it could be that it's quite hard at the beginning, or like you're at the hurdle where it's like, oh, I've got to put in quite a lot of effort here to see some real output, and it's challenging and it's uncomfortable. But sometimes it's just the thing isn't for you, right? Like you're just not getting the pleasure or the interest or this mental stimulation out of this thing that you first thought. And the reason why it's important to accept this is because people often don't start and give things a go because they think they're not allowed to quit. You have to do everything you've ever started till the end of the eternity, effectively. No. Quitting is actually a natural part of cycles. And when you allow yourself to accept that if you do give it your all and you do try with this thing and it's just not right, that at some point it's okay to quit. And it's interesting because in terms of companies and products and businesses, a lot of them say like, we let go of things when they don't work. Like we might try and roll out a product like Apple. I think I've spoken about this in a lot of these big tech giants, but this is just a thing in business on a whole. We try some stuff, we get feedback, people don't like it, it's not working, we throw it out, or we iterate, we try something new. Like that's okay, that is part of the process, right? So whilst it's not okay, I guess, to just quit everything because, this is challenging, or it's also okay if you come to the conclusion that this thing wasn't for me. That was it for this video. I'm really enjoying exploring this whole multiple passions and interests kind of world. And I think that we've definitely are building a community here on this channel. But yeah, let me know how you felt about this video. Just leave me a comment. Let me know, let's talk. Let's discuss a little bit more. What are you finding challenging? Do you resonate with any of these points? But I will see you in the next video.